It wobbles. That's why I do that, you see? There. Now it doesn't wobble. As if I have a glass of water standing on this thing and it can fall over. One of the funnest places to volunteer is to ring the bells. You hear it every Sunday morning. They play these beautiful songs and hymns. We've even had the Beatles played up there. Not just jingle bells. If you want to do that, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. I know some of the young people have gone up and they've tried that out. It is quite the thing. I don't know if you've ever been. If you can, go up and go look. They have to play them with these levers that they are. It is something else. And it's wonderful. What a gift. What a gift that is. We're closing our series talking about God's purpose in our life. And we called it Live It Out. Go live out God's purposes in your life. And I said last week we're going to do 2 on the life of David. And we did the first one last week on a man to God's own heart, where we realized that it means not that David was perfect, but that God's heart went after David, despite the fact that he was Hakatan, the youngest, the runt of the litter. God went after him. So today we're going to continue. We're going to do another story, and this is also the conclusion of our series. And today's story you know so well. It's the story of David and Goliath. Many of you grew up with that in Sunday school. Now, just a little warning at the beginning. Familiarity breeds contempt. So do not let the familiarity of this make you not listen with new ears to an old story. So I'm going to read it little by little. And Ted, I hope you got it the way I sent it, that you got it right. It was quite the job that I gave you. Thank you. 1 Samuel chapter 17. Sorry. 1 Samuel chapter 17. Let's read the first 11 verses, and then I'll skip to verse 16 for now. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Socoh and Azekah. I need a bonus for saying all these words at the end of the month. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle lines to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with a valley between them. A champion, or sometimes they call him a war hero, a champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was about 6 cubits and a span. In normal English, that's about 9 foot 9 inches. He was quite the guy. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. In English, that's 125 pounds. On his legs, he wore bronze greaves or shin guards, whatever you call them, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels, 15 pounds. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. And if he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill you, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Verse 16 says, "For 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand." For 40 days it's been going on. Every morning, first thing they hear when they wake up, is this giant Philistine standing out there, laughing at them, making fun of them, taunting them. The last thing they hear when they go to bed in this evening is this Philistine standing out there, laughing at them, taunting them, defying them. I don't think we'll be too wrong if somehow we think that in the end, 40 days, all they could think of, all they could hear, all they could see was this giant that's there in front of them. And as we say that, have any of you ever faced a problem or a challenge that became so big that was all that you could see all the time? That's what you're facing, Goliath, right there in your face. Here's the problem with these Goliaths in our lives. They usually come with these two things called fear and anxiety with them. And they'll just consume your whole life. And even if the problem isn't really that big, they start overwhelming you, and they do this horrible thing to us. They give us what we call tunnel vision. And all you see is the giant. You don't see everything else that is there for you. Just this giant. That's all you focus on. And it paralyzes you. We saw that with Saul and the Israelites, verse 11. They were dismayed and terrified. The Hebrew word for dismayed is interesting. Chatat. It also means to be discouraged. It means to lose heart. It means to feel like this is never going to change. Can I ask you, isn't that what the giants in our lives often do to us? They discourage us. They paralyze us, and we're stuck, and all we see is the giant. So there's your background. The next part of the story now, David's going to appear on the scene. Now remember, David wasn't a warrior. David wasn't a soldier. David was tending the sheep. He was the least. The brothers were fighting. David was taking care of sheep. And now David is going to do the DoorDash thing. Dad sent him to bring food to the brothers, right? They got it. Yes. He does the DoorDash. So let's read. Verse 17. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit and see how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They're with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines." When David sets out on his DoorDash mission, that's all he has in mind. I'm taking bread and I'm taking cheese. And I'm going to take a message back to my father, and I'm going to go take care of my sheep again. David has no idea that on that day, he was going to slay a giant. Don't miss the point. God will often use simple, ordinary, everyday things to put you in a position to take down a giant. Can I say that again? You might think you're doing a DoorDash, but God might put you in that position to slay a giant. What are the giants in your life? Are they so big that you can't put down the cheese for a second and take care of them? Maybe you can do it with the cheese in your hand, because sometimes they're not as big as we think. Verse 26, David asked the men standing near him, "So what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" And they repeated to him what they'd been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for the man who kills him." And now I'm going back to verse 25 because that's where they said it. "The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give him his daughter in marriage, and he will exempt his family from taxes in Israel." I loved this question when I read it. It's a little audacious, isn't it? It's also maybe a little greedy. But I don't want you to miss what it's actually saying. Because when David looks at this giant, he doesn't see what we always see. When we see the giant, we only see the problem. But David looks at the giant, and he also sees an opportunity, right? Because he looks at him and he thinks, yeah, I could be killed. But yeah, if I kill him and I get rid of him, my family is exempt from taxes, I'm getting a wife, and the king's going to take care of me. Is that how we look at our giants? Or do we stop with, this is the problem. I can't do this. It's too big. Let me give you a few examples to say what I mean. It might be that the difficult conversation that you need to have, that you've been putting off for so long, might end badly. Or it might lead to healing and reconciliation. It might be really hard to confess the struggles that you've been struggling with and going through. Or it might be that when you do that, there is healing and freedom that waits. God might not answer that prayer that you've been praying for, that miracle, in the way that you want, but God might answer in the way that you need. When you face the giants, see the possibilities. That when I slay that giant and take care of it, my life might just change. Because can I ask you this? Which giant in this world, in my life, in your life, is bigger than the God who walks with me and with you? Which giant in this world can I not go face if I take the Lord's hand and I walk with the Lord and I stand behind him and the Lord takes care of this giant? Let me show you how that works. Verse 32, David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go fight him." Saul replied, "You're not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior for his whole youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it and struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. And when it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." Now listen carefully. I'm going to repeat this verse in a second. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Can I translate David's words? "Saul, I've faced many more giants than you can even think of. And when I had to face them, God was there and I took care of them. Buddy, bring on that giant. Let's go." Because here's the thing, verse 37. "The Lord who rescued me," can I put a word in there? "The Lord who rescued me then from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear is the Lord who will rescue me now from this giant and the hand of this giant. The Lord who rescued me then is the Lord who will rescue me now." Look at your life. How many giants have you slayed with God? That God who rescued you then, do you think that God's going to let go of you now and say, "Not done with you"? The Lord who rescued you then is the Lord who will rescue you now. And we're going to sing that this morning in the last song that we're going to sing. Firm foundation. It says, "Christ is my firm foundation. The rock on which I stand is faithful through generations. So why would he fail me now? He won't. Because the Lord who rescued me then will rescue me again and again and again and again. You're not doing this on your own. The Lord is there with you. And there is no giant that is bigger than my God. My God who could speak a word and speak a creation into being. My God who could put his son on a cross and walk him out of a grave and give us life everlasting. Come on, Goliath, bring it on. Bring it on. I'll grab you by the hair and I'll smack you hard. And you're not going to take me. The Lord who rescued me then is the Lord who rescues me now. Don't allow Goliath to give you tunnel vision and only hear him. There is one way stronger than he. Look. Verse 40. Then David took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. I love this story. It's so beautiful. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. Isn't that what our giants do? They look down on us because they think they can overwhelm us and scare us because they blow themselves up to make themselves look big. And he looks and he despises, but he's making a mistake. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin," and here comes your biblical but. "But I come against you with a spear and a javelin. I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." Hebrew uses the most beautiful words, Yahweh Tsebaot. There is no one stronger than Yahweh Tsebaot, the Almighty God, who is the God. Sometimes we translate Yahweh Tsebaot with the Lord of the heavenly armies. You come against me? Man, I got the whole army behind me. I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. But this day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Sorry for the gory parts. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And all those gathered here will know, listen again, that it is not by a sword or a spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. And he will give all of you into our hands. Now, my friends, that's confidence. Not self-confidence, not overconfidence. That is confidence in the Lord who was there then and the Lord who is there now. That firm foundation. Many of you read the book to your kids and your grandkids of the little engine that could. Can you remember that book? There's this train and all these engines come, say no, and then this little engine comes and it takes this whole train and it goes up the hill, and what did it say? I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. No, 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 no. When we face the giants, I know I can. Why? Because the battle is the Lord's. It is not mine. I come to you, Goliath, in the name of Yahweh Tsebaot, the Lord God Almighty. You might be a mighty warrior, but God is way more than that. I know I can. You know you can, because you're not alone. Remember Paul? We did a whole series on that. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, take all of this to the Lord, and his peace will come. And then verse 13 of Philippians 4 says, because I can do all things with my spear and my javelin through Christ, my firm foundation, who gives me strength. There is no Goliath that can overwhelm you when you walk with the Lord. When David walked into that battlefield that day, David was the one who knew the truth. Goliath was not the giant on that battlefield. God was. Goliath was a little dwarf who could do nothing. Because the battle is not mine, it's not yours, it is the Lord's. Imagine the possibilities when we step out in faith. I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm going to read one verse. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. What do we do with our giants? We take off and we run. David says, hold on a minute. I can't wait for this. Let's go. When the giant came for him, David went for him. Because David knew what you and I should remember. That the power of the Lord becomes ours that moment that we step out in faith. When the Israelites came to the river, in faith, God said, put out your feet, walk. And that river opened up. When they stepped out in faith, it opened up and there was the promised land. When Peter got out of that boat and he walked and he stepped out in faith, he walked on the water. The moment he looked at the giant, boom, he then went down. David walked right up to his giant and said, I'm going to take you, buddy. Because I am doing this in the name of the Lord. And when I step out in faith, I can conquer the giants. Which giant in your life is bigger than the Lord that you cannot, with the Lord, conquer when you walk out in faith? I'm not saying it's easy. You're still going into battle. But you know that the battle is the Lord's. And who can stand against the Lord God Almighty? Story ends. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. And so David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Took 50 verses to talk about the giant. Took one verse for the giant to be slayed. Which giant is so big that you cannot slay him in the power of the Lord? Because here's the most beautiful part of the story that comes a little later. One day on a hill, on Calvary, there was a cross. There was a man that was nailed to that cross. And all the giants of the world and the sin was just put on his shoulders. And the chief of the giants stood out there. His name is Satan, and he started laughing and dancing because he just killed the Son of God. And we all lost, he thought. And when they put him in that grave and rolled that stone, he danced his dance of joy on that grave because he had conquered, because the Son of God had died. 3 days. 3 days, and the giant of God walked out of that grave. And he put that giant Satan in his place forever. Do you know where Satan is right now? Go read Revelation. God put everything in their place, and Satan too. under God's foot. He conquered that giant, and that giant has lost. What giant can come against you and against me when the battle is the Lord's? So how about you get out there and you go take care of a few giants, because you can. Praise team's going to come up. They're going to come sing with us this song that I said, Christ is my firm foundation. And when we sing that, in a moment, if you want to, make that a profession of your faith. Christ is my firm foundation. The rock on which I stand is faithful through the generations. He won't fail me. Not now, not then, not ever.